Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People's Story. The first time I caught the HOA board member treating my private pool like her personal resort, I was in the middle of a crucial video conference with a major client. I work as a software developer from home, which means I have a perfect view of my backyard throughout the day. That particular afternoon, I was presenting a new application design when loud splashing and laughter started coming from outside my office window. I had to mute myself mid-sentence and look out to see what was happening. There she was, the woman who lived 3 houses down the street, floating on one of my pool loungers with a beer in her hand. Her husband was doing laps in my pool, and 2 other adults I recognized from the neighborhood were sitting on my patio furniture like they owned the place. I've never had to mute myself during a client call to yell, "Are you kidding me?" before, but this was apparently going to be a first. I somehow managed to finish the presentation while watching these people use my property like a public swimming facility. By the time I got outside after the call ended, they were gone. But the mess they left behind told the whole story. Empty beer cans were scattered around my patio, which was ironic considering our HOA has strict rules about alcohol consumption in common areas. There were greasy sunscreen slicks floating on the water surface, and someone had thrown wet towels all over my expensive outdoor furniture. I spent the next hour cleaning up after people who had absolutely no right to be on my property in the first place. The woman I'm talking about is on our HOA board and thinks that gives her some kind of authority over the entire neighborhood. She's in her 50s, drives a white SUV with HOA decals all over it, and has this superiority complex that makes every interaction with her feel like you're being lectured by a school principal. She weaponizes the HOA rulebook against residents she doesn't like while completely ignoring those same rules when it comes to her own behavior. Our neighborhood is one of those upper-middle-class developments where every lawn looks identical and there's a thick binder of regulations covering everything from mailbox colors to garbage can placement. The official community pool is tiny, constantly packed with screaming kids, and has these ridiculous restricted hours that make it basically useless for adult swimming. But that doesn't give anyone the right to use my private pool without permission. I bought this house specifically because of the backyard pool. After years of apartment living and saving every penny, this was my dream home. The pool was my sanctuary where I could relax after long work weeks. And now this entitled board member thought she could just waltz in whenever she felt like it. The next day, I decided to handle this like a reasonable adult. I waited until I saw her checking her mail and walked over to have a polite conversation about boundaries. I explained that the pool was private property and asked her not to use it without permission. She looked at me like I had just suggested something completely outrageous. She told me I was being dramatic and that neighbors should be willing to share. She said it was about community spirit and pointed out that I'm always inside working anyway, so it's not like I was using the pool. She actually tried to make me feel like I was the unreasonable one for not wanting strangers in my backyard. I stood my ground and explained that it was both a liability issue and a privacy concern. I asked her again not to trespass on my property. She just scoffed and walked away, making it clear she had no intention of listening to anything I said. I thought maybe she would respect my wishes after our conversation, but I was completely wrong. Instead of stopping, she got sneakier about it. She started waiting until my car was gone before inviting her friends over for pool parties. I began finding evidence of their visits when I got home from errands. The patio furniture would be moved around, the pool cover would be thrown aside carelessly, and once I found a child's pool toy floating in the deep end. They weren't even trying to cover their tracks properly. That's when my tech background came in handy. I installed high-definition motion-activated security cameras covering the entire backyard and pool area. I made sure they were clearly visible, thinking they might serve as a deterrent. The board member chose to ignore them completely. The cameras captured everything. She and her family were using my pool multiple times every week. One weekend, she actually hosted what looked like a birthday party for her grandchild in my backyard. I had hours of footage showing people I didn't know swimming in my pool, eating food on my patio, and treating my property like their private club. I compiled the best footage into a video file and sent a formal cease and desist letter via certified mail. The letter politely but firmly stated that she was trespassing and that any further incidents would be reported to the police. I also sent a copy of the letter along with the video evidence to the entire HOA board. The HOA response was completely useless. They sent back some generic form letter about resolving neighborly disputes amicably and took absolutely no action against their fellow board member. It was clear they were protecting one of their own. That's when the real harassment began. After receiving my letter, she started retaliating with petty HOA violation notices. Suddenly, my grass was half an inch too tall. I had left a garbage can out for an hour past the deadline, and my house numbers weren't exactly the right shade of black according to her interpretation of the rules. The security cameras also caught her flipping off one of them during one of her trespassing visits, showing just how much respect she had for my property and my requests. I realized that direct confrontation and official channels weren't going to work. I needed a solution that was completely legal, but would make her never want to set foot near my pool again. While I was looking at my smart home control panel one evening, which connects to all my pool systems, I had what you might call a moment of malicious inspiration. I have a pool heater that can be controlled remotely through my phone app. My plan was to superheat the pool water. Not to a dangerous temperature that could hurt anyone, but to an extremely uncomfortable level that would make swimming feel like bathing in lukewarm soup on a hot summer day. But that was just phase 1 of my plan. Phase 2 was more elaborate. I ordered and installed what I described to anyone who asked as a new eco-friendly automated deck cleaning and plant misting system. In reality, these were several high-pressure sprinkler heads strategically placed around the pool deck and aimed at all the entry points. The sprinklers were connected to the cold water line and triggered by the same motion sensors that controlled my security cameras. I programmed them to activate whenever someone stepped onto the pool deck area. To make sure the board member would take the bait, I needed her to think I was away from home. I posted on our neighborhood's social media page about being excited for a weekend getaway to the mountains. I packed a visible bag, loaded up my car, and drove off on a Friday afternoon. Instead of actually going to the mountains, I checked into a hotel about 30 minutes away. I spent the weekend monitoring my security camera feeds from my laptop, waiting to see if she would take advantage of my supposed absence. It was a scorching hot Saturday when everything came together perfectly. I was sitting in my air-conditioned hotel room with coffee and my laptop, watching the live camera feed like a general monitoring a battlefield. Just as I predicted, she saw that my car was gone and felt emboldened. Around noon, she showed up with her husband and another couple, all carrying towels and beach bags. They kicked off their sandals and jumped into the pool expecting cool relief from the heat. Their reactions were immediate and hilarious. I watched them surface with confused and disgusted expressions. The water temperature was set to about 99 degrees, which felt like swimming in human soup on a day when it was already 95 degrees outside. I could see them talking animatedly, clearly complaining about the temperature. One of them kept checking the pool thermometer while they all looked miserable, floating in the uncomfortably warm water. After about 10 minutes of suffering in the hot water, they decided to get out. The moment the first person stepped onto the pool deck, the motion sensors triggered my sprinkler system. What happened next was pure chaos. Powerful jets of ice-cold water blasted them from multiple directions. It wasn't a gentle misting system. These were high-pressure streams designed to clean concrete. They shrieked in shock and started slipping on the suddenly wet tiles while trying to shield themselves from the water. The board member was getting hit right in the face as she tried to climb the pool ladder. Her friends were screaming and grabbing their belongings while being pelted with cold water from all angles. They were completely soaked and shivering within seconds. The whole thing was captured in glorious 4K video with crystal clear audio of their complaints and panic. They scrambled to gather their things and ran off my property looking like drowned rats. I returned home on Sunday evening and found an angry voicemail waiting for me. The board member was accusing me of setting a dangerous trap and threatening to report me to the police and the HOA. The next morning, she confronted me in my driveway. Her face was red with anger as she demanded to know what I had done to my pool and sprinkler system. I acted completely innocent and concerned. I told her I had no idea what she was talking about and asked if she was admitting to trespassing on my property while I was out of town. I mentioned that my security system had been recording all weekend and offered to review the footage together. When she threatened to go to the authorities, I calmly told her to please go ahead. I suggested we call them right away so they could see the hours of footage showing her and her friends trespassing, and then we could discuss how my new automated sprinkler system had apparently malfunctioned. I thanked her for letting me know about the pool heater issue and said I would definitely call a technician to fix whatever was causing it to overheat. I mentioned that her testimony would be invaluable for the repair report. She realized she was completely trapped. Any complaints she made would require admitting to repeated trespassing, and I had video evidence of every single incident. The threat of me releasing the humiliating sprinkler footage to the police, the HOA board, or the entire neighborhood was enough to ensure her complete silence. The petty violation notices stopped immediately. She started avoiding eye contact with me and hasn't been seen anywhere near my property since that weekend. My pool is now the peaceful sanctuary I always wanted it to be. The board member learned that my property lines aren't suggestions, and I learned that sometimes the best defense against entitled people is giving them exactly what they're asking for, just not in the way they expected. She wanted to treat my pool like a public water park, so I gave her an authentic water park experience, complete with surprise splashes and plenty of shrieking. My backyard has been perfectly quiet ever since. Update: 3 months later. A lot of people have been asking for an update on what happened after my sprinkler system taught the HOA board member a lesson about respecting private property. I'm happy to report that things have gotten even better than I expected. First, the board member kept her word about staying away from my pool. In fact, she's been avoiding me completely. She crosses the street when she sees me getting my mail and has stopped attending the monthly HOA meetings that happen at the community center. I heard through neighborhood gossip that she's been telling people she's too busy with other commitments, but everyone knows the real reason. About a month after the sprinkler incident, something interesting happened. I was working in my home office when I noticed a different HOA board member approaching my front door. This was an older gentleman who had always seemed reasonable during the few interactions we'd had. He knocked politely and waited while I came to the door. He introduced himself formally and asked if we could have a private conversation about the ongoing situation with his fellow board member. It turns out that other residents had been complaining about her behavior for months. She had been using her position to harass people over minor violations while ignoring major issues that actually needed attention. Several homeowners had contacted him privately about her abuse of power. He told me that the board had been looking for a way to address her conduct, but they needed documented evidence of her overstepping boundaries. My security footage and the formal complaints I had filed provided exactly what they needed to take action. The board held a special meeting where they reviewed all the evidence of her trespassing on my property. They also looked into other complaints about her selective enforcement of HOA rules. The other board members were apparently horrified by the footage of her pool parties and her complete disregard for property rights. She was asked to resign from her position on the board. When she refused, they held a vote and removed her officially. The board member who came to speak with me said it was one of the easiest votes they had ever taken. But wait, it gets better. Remember how she had been hitting me with all those petty violation notices as retaliation? Well, the new board reviewed all of those citations and found that most of them were either completely fabricated or blown way out of proportion. They sent me a formal letter apologizing for the harassment and removed all the violations from my record. They also implemented new policies requiring board members to get approval from at least 2 other members before issuing any violation notices. This was specifically designed to prevent future abuse of power. The really satisfying part came about 2 months later. I was enjoying my pool on a Sunday afternoon when I heard arguing coming from her house. Apparently, she had been hit with a violation notice for having too many decorative items in her front yard. The new board was applying the same strict interpretation of the rules that she had used against everyone else. She tried to argue that the decorations were within guidelines, but the board pointed out that her own previous enforcement decisions had set the precedent for how strictly those rules should be applied. They were essentially using her own tactics against her. I heard she got 3 more violation notices over the following weeks for things like her garbage cans being visible from the street for too long and having a small oil stain on her driveway. Each time, the board referenced her own previous enforcement actions as justification for the citations. The final piece of karma came when she listed her house for sale last month. Apparently, living in a neighborhood where the HOA was now treating her the same way she had treated everyone else became too much for her to handle. During the house showing process, several potential buyers asked about neighborhood disputes after seeing the excessive number of security cameras around my property. When real estate agents explained that there had been some privacy issues with the previous homeowner, it hurt her sale prospects. She ended up accepting an offer that was about $15,000 below her asking price. I know this because property sales are public record and I may have checked out of curiosity. Her replacement on the HOA board is a retired teacher who actually reads the rules before enforcing them. She's been incredibly reasonable to work with and has focused the board's attention on actual community issues rather than harassing individual homeowners. The best part is that my pool security system has become something of a neighborhood legend. Several neighbors have asked me about the setup, and a few have installed similar systems to protect their own properties. The former board member's sprinkler experience has apparently become a cautionary tale that gets shared at neighborhood gatherings. I also discovered that the footage of the sprinkler incident had been seen by more people than I realized. The board member who came to speak with me mentioned that the other board members had found it quite entertaining, though they were professional enough not to share it beyond the official review. One neighbor told me that her husband had asked if I would be willing to set up a similar system for their backyard after they had issues with teenagers cutting through their property. I politely declined but gave them the contact information for the company that installed my sprinklers. My property values have actually increased since the whole incident. The new board has focused on real community improvements rather than petty harassment, and the neighborhood has become much more pleasant to live in. Several new families have moved in recently, and they all comment on how welcoming and peaceful the area feels. As for my pool, it's been the perfect retreat I always wanted it to be. I've hosted a few small gatherings for neighbors who have become genuine friends, and everyone respects the simple courtesy of asking permission before using someone else's property. The former board member's house sold last week, and the new owners seem like lovely people. They introduced themselves properly and even brought a housewarming gift. It's amazing how much better the neighborhood feels when everyone follows basic rules of respect and courtesy. I still have the security cameras and sprinkler system set up, though I've adjusted the settings to be less aggressive. They now serve as a visible reminder that my property boundaries are serious, while still being reasonable for legitimate visitors who have permission to be there. The whole experience taught me that sometimes standing up to bullies requires creativity and patience, but it's always worth it in the end. The former board member learned that authority without accountability eventually backfires, and I learned that a well-planned response can solve problems more effectively than endless arguments. My backyard remains my sanctuary, and now it's protected by both technology and the hard-earned respect of everyone in the neighborhood. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well, especially when you can do it while floating peacefully in your own pool. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Landlords are a-holes, generally speaking. Everyone knows that. But if you think residential landlords are bad, they're nothing compared to commercial landlords. Landlords of commercial buildings are some of the cruelest, nastiest people I've ever come across. This revenge tale is about a commercial landlord and how I dealt with him. Back in the 90s, sometimes I'd go for lunch at this restaurant in the basement of our building. The place was called The Vault because it had a massive bank vault that had always been there, dating back to the days before the place was turned into a restaurant. The vault was so huge that they could seat a couple of tables in there, and you could eat dinner surrounded by rows of old, gleaming safe deposit boxes. One day I was there for lunch, and the owner took me aside. "The landlord's driving me nuts," he said. "The landlord drives everyone nuts?" I said. I was a subtenant in the same building, sharing space with an older lawyer, Aaron, and the landlord was always causing us trouble. I'd already had a few run-ins with him, and we hated each other on site. In most jurisdictions, commercial landlords don't need court orders to get you out if you're late with the rent. Instead, they just change the locks, and you find out about it when you show up and your key doesn't work. Every time our landlord had a dispute with anyone, which was often, he'd always threaten to change the locks. "He keeps demanding all this stuff for extra rent," the vault's owner said, and it's really weird because a lot of it's really old. The restaurant owner showed me a letter the landlord had served on him earlier that day. I looked over the demand and read a list of expenses for snow removal and parking lot repair and common area flooring and all kinds of crap going back years. I read it all the way to the end, and there it was, the usual clause saying he was going to change the locks if the tenant didn't pay this and do that. "You do something to make the landlord hate you?" I asked, because this is a bit over the top, even for our a-hole landlord. "He knows I'm moving the restaurant. I think he's trying to grab as much money as possible before I go. Plus, he's giving me grief over the vault. He won't let you take it with you?" "Are you kidding? It weighs almost 100 tons and I don't need it. But the lease says I have to remove it and that I also have to restore the building to what it was before there was a vault. That would cost a fortune. The a-hole landlord says if I leave the vault behind when I move, he'll sue." "Send your lease up to my office and let me look it over," I said. I finished my lunch, and when I got back to my office, the lease was waiting for me. It was just as bad as the restaurant owner said. The lease was a renewal of an assignment of a renewal. The original documents, dating back to the shortly after WW2, when a bank first leased the place and the vault was installed. Somehow, the landlord had suckered the restaurant into taking over a lease that left him liable to remove a bank vault at the end of term. No big deal, I thought. The restaurant can default and all the landlord can do is sue a shell company. But when I got to the last page of the lease, there was a guarantee clause. The restaurant owner had personally guaranteed the lease, and he was on the hook for removing a vault weighing 100 tons and then fixing the place up. It would cost a fortune. The case was hopeless, of course. That was obvious right away. But then I thought about the a-hole landlord with his demands and his threats and his rent hikes, and I asked my brain to do me a solid, which it promptly did. I picked up the phone and called the restaurant owner. "I'm ducked, right?" he said. "You're calling me to say there's no way out. That's what my commercial lawyer already said, but I just thought I'd ask. I can save you, but it's gonna cost." "How much?" $5,000 in legals and another G-note for the agent." "Agent? What kind of agent?" "Real estate. Send up a check, certified, and leave the rest to me." The check hit my desk in less than an hour. I went to Aaron's office. "I need a real estate agent," I said. "You buying a house?" "Nope." "Selling a house?" "Nope." By this point, I'd been sharing space with Aaron for almost 5 years, and he knew me pretty well. "You pulling one of your stunts again?" he asked. "Yep." but nothing that will get you into trouble. Aaron reached out for his old-school Rolodex and started flipping through it. I know a guy, he said. Aaron knew all kinds of guys, and that's one of the reasons he eventually got disbarred. But he knew a guy, and he gave me the agent's name and number, and the next day I paid the agent a visit. I told him what I needed, and we agreed to terms. I gave him some papers and the cash for his fee. A few days later, I was again at the vault for lunch. The owner saw me walk in and greeted me himself. "The landlord's here," he said. "Why?" "For lunch, and to be an a-hole. Let's sit in the vault room so I don't have to look at his face." He took me to the vault room, and with the door almost completely closed, we had a consultation while we ate pasta and drank red wine. "We're making demand on the landlord," I said, between bites of a perfect carbonara. "Demand? What are we demanding?" I pulled a document out of my briefcase and passed it to him while I sipped my wine. "We're demanding that the a-hole landlord release all the restaurant equipment, all the fixtures, the ovens, the freezers, the ventilation, everything you need to run a restaurant. The lease exempts all that stuff," the restaurant guy told me. "He can't stop me taking what I want. The only thing that matters is the vault, and of course I don't want that." I shook my head. "You need the vault," I said, "and we're demanding that he release the bank vault as well. We're insisting that he let you take it out within 7 business days. You think you can beat the landlord with reverse psychology? You think if you treat him like a 2-year-old, you can manipulate him into doing what you want? We'll find out soon enough. He's had the demand for a couple of days now." The restaurant owner dropped his wine glass and it shattered on the marble floor. "You already gave it to him?" the restaurant owner said. He got up, swung open the vault door, and called for the waiter to clean up the mess. "Let's see what the landlord has to say," I told him, and we walked over to the landlord's table. The landlord was a big, beefy man with a big appetite. He sat alone, eating a rack of lamb wolfishly with his hands. "My client needs an answer today," I said. The landlord looked up at me as he chewed noisily. "I'm the vault's lawyer," I said. "I gave you a demand the other day. My client needs an answer right now. He needs the vault for a new place, and he's got to make arrangements." "Your client can forget about the bank vault," he said, wiping his massive, greasy hands on an already soiled napkin. "But you can't do that," I said. My shock was feigned, but the restaurant owner's jaw dropped for real. The landlord laughed at us. "I'm the landlord. I can do what I want." "I'm gonna need that in writing, because my client might sue," I said. "Sue all you like," the landlord told me. "Sue till you're blue in the face." He told me that I'd have a formal response by day's end, and then he told me to go away and let him finish his lunch. When the letter arrived from the landlord claiming ownership over the bank vault, I brought it downstairs and showed it to my client. "How the hell did you do that?" "Trade secret," I said. The following month, the restaurant moved out and the place was empty, and that was too bad because I had always liked eating at the vault. Now the restaurant was in a new location 20 minutes away. They called the new place The Vault, and they'd preserved the vibe of the old place. It was very similar, except they didn't have the bank vault. The bank vault, all 100 tons of it, was where it had always been, in the basement of the building where I rented space. I showed up for work a little after that, and Aaron collared me. "The landlord's looking for you," he said. "Oh yeah? What about?" "He's really angry. He said his deal fell through." Deal? He was supposed to rent the place downstairs to a new tenant, a bank or a credit union or something like that. They were supposed to come in to sign a lease, but they didn't show up. "And what's that got to do with me?" I said to Aaron, and I said the same thing again to the landlord when he managed to track me down a couple of days later. "I know you were behind this," he said, his jowls quivering. "I know it was you. That offer from the agent, it was all bullcrap. Just a trick to make me keep the vault so that your client could sneak out of the place and leave that ducking bank vault behind. I'm gonna sue. If you're looking for counsel, I think I'm going to have to declare a conflict. I'm gonna sue the restaurant and that agent, and I'm gonna sue you." He stormed off. But the landlord didn't sue. Of course he didn't. He didn't have a contract to sue on, only a vague letter of intent that I'd drafted, enough to hook a greedy landlord who was used to having his way. The offer he'd received was non-binding, incapable of acceptance without the signing of a formal lease, which of course never got signed. When I left Aaron's place a year later, the downstairs was still unoccupied, with a sad for rent sign sitting in the window starting to look faded. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Last year, a cat started talking to mine through a window. I thought this was cute that they decided to be friends, but when I opened the door, the stray cat ran off. I assumed I would never see him again since no cats survive very long outside where I live. We have coyotes, hawks, and owls, which have all led to me never seeing the same cat more than once in the 11 years I've lived here. This cat, who we've since named Blue, is just different. He kept coming by to visit every day for a month. Eventually, he walked inside the house. My wife caught him and took him to the Humane Society, assuming they would put him up for adoption. Instead, they told us about their community cat program. They spayed and vaccinated him, clipped his ear, and told us to return him where we found him. We released him and assumed after kidnapping him and chopping his balls off that he'd never want to have anything to do with us again. Instead, he kept coming by. He would come inside, snuggle our dogs and cat, and sleep with them all day, then go out at night and do whatever he wanted. Then we'd be walking the dogs around the neighborhood, and he would start following us, which everyone who saw thought was hilarious. Everyone except my HOA, that is. They got pissed, claimed the cat was mine, and told me that I couldn't let him out unsupervised. We started keeping him inside and just taking him on walks with the dogs to get his wiggles out, because when he didn't get outside time, he would start destroying everything in the house. This was working pretty well, but he kept eating any low-lying bird families, and this pissed off a couple of the neighbors who again complained to the HOA. So then the board proposed a change to the neighborhood rules that would require all pets to be leashed, not just dogs. A lot of people wrote in saying this was idiotic, joking about leashing their turtles and guinea pigs, etc. Nevertheless, the board passed the new rule. When I read it, I realized it didn't say anything about the length of the leash or that it needed to be held. So we got him a ridiculously short leash that he now just drags along behind him. I also contacted the Humane Society and told them how ridiculous my HOA has been, and they are going to send their social media team over to make some videos of the cat for their channels. The next one is an entitled people story. I, 31F, have a 48F friend who's always going through a crisis. I've covered our lunches for her to say she'll get the next one. The next meal ends up being a much cheaper restaurant. One time she offered to cook and return, but as the day wore on, it ended up being a pre-made meal from an albeit nicer grocery store nearby. I've cooked freshly cooked meals for her because I know we're both on limited income. I guess she feels like she owes me a meal only if I pay for it at a restaurant. Another time I picked up some kitchen items from someone in my community. I told her about it and she said she could use some items too. I said I'll set aside some, it's for her. When she arrived, I gave her the items I picked out for her, and she started going through the rest of the box, pulling items out, saying she could use these. I was taken aback because I haven't even gone through the stuff for myself yet. She's also asked me to come along and watch her table for her at a fair she sells arts and crafts at 2 hours away, and in return, she get me a nice lunch. I covered our lunch at a nicer restaurant. I said no thanks since it was a 13-hour day. This summer, I've been helping her pack and do miscellaneous things around her place. After being there 7 hours one day, I asked if she wanted to stop for something to eat. She said, no, because she's too sick to eat anything. A few days later, she asked if I could go to the grocery store and pick up her favorite vegetable and she'll make us soup for lunch from the items in her freezer. I said, no thanks, I already ate. I've been in the habit of eating lunch before I go over since she doesn't offer me anything to eat. She's also asked me if I owned lawn clippers and that I could take all the weeds in the backyard and bring back some eggs in exchange. I was taken aback because she wasn't doing me a favor by having me mow her lawn. Maybe I misunderstood her and she was going to use the clippers herself. This summer, I've been helping her pack for her move. The night before she is supposed to leave, I buy and bring her and her roommate dinner. She originally said she'll order takeout for us all. I've been there for 7 hours already today packing. I went home to rest and came back to bring her dinner. I originally offered to bring tea, but somehow, like it always does, it turns into something else. Shortly after she eats half of each entree she requested, she goes back to the garage to pack up bits and pieces. I'm washing her dishes, and she comes back into the house screaming that she never has any help, and she's sick and tired of this seskext. She lifted a heavy box and hurt herself doing it. She said she was calling out for help, but no one came. I don't know why she doesn't just walk 10 feet up to the house and call for help if it was that heavy. She screams and curses some more and then returns to talking in a normal tone. I'm honestly tired of her tirades. She's on the spectrum and said she's better than non-neurodivergent people because she sees things other people don't. This reeks of insecurity to me, especially since she's nearing 50 and talking about how she was much more mature than others, talking about her reading level, taste in cuisine, how she dressed herself up all the time because she knew she looked better than a lot of people her age. She cries poor all the time but buys a $7 latte and $16 lunch every day and says she doesn't have money for this or that. She posted about how some friends leave you high and dry when you need them. I've never asked for her help with anything, so I don't know why she expects so much from me. Please give me advice on how to avoid people like her. My other friend told me I was the red flag because I met 2 people like her around the same time. Anyway, thank you for watching.